Hello and welcome. You're watching the special edition of Political Capital. This is the show where Delhi meets the Lal Street. I'm Vivek. Joining me now is senior BJP leader Jayant Sinha, who's also the director of the India Foundation, which recently hosted the India Economic Convention 2014, which detailed Narendra Modi's economic agenda going into the general elections. Jayant is among the most prominent professionals who have chosen to step in and play an active role in the political sphere. He has over 20 years of experience in investing and strategy consulting, and recently stepped down as managing director at Omidyar Network. Jayant has spent over a decade at McKinsey & Company as well, and is an alumnus of the Harvard Business School and IIT Delhi. Thanks very much, Jayant. It's a pleasure talking to you. We saw quite a show the other day in Delhi.
Yes, indeed. We were very much hoping that we would have a very good turnout from business people, investors and economic experts to hear Mr. Modi give, his economic agenda. And we were, in fact, able to get about 350 people from those three different groups there. And I think he gave a wonderful speech, which was very reassuring, in fact, to that audience and to a larger global audience. Obviously, the market's been on an unprecedented tear since then. So
does it worry you?
Of course it does.
Of
course it does. Well, being someone who has been an investor for a very long time, and of course, at Courage Capital, we were running a global hedge fund, and I was investing in India as well. So you kind of know how markets work, and you obviously worry all the time about expectations, which is where the market is right now. And the expectations are really built around a decisive victory for the BJP, and then a set of policies which will, in fact, get India moving again and get growth and jobs back in a way that we had a few years ago, but which really has languished for the last few years.
Is it the expectations that are worrying you, or is there some resonance with the fact that it's not done yet? There is still some way to go, but the market seems to be believing it's all done and dusted.
No, that's very well said, Vivek. I think it's a combination of factors. First, of course, the reality is there's still an election to be won and a government to be formed. So that's one political reality that is very much still to be realized. And so we have to work towards that. The second thing is that even if the government was to be formed and there was to be a victory on May 16, 2014, the scorched earth policy, if you will, Dr. Banagria just wrote about that in the Times of India yesterday. But the scorched earth policy of the UPA government, the kind of economic problems and challenges that this country faces, to turn that around is going to be a herculean task. And so that's certainly going to take a while. That's factor number two. And then factor number three is that, people's aspirations and expectations are sky high right now. And even if you were to form the government and come up with the right policies, to be able to match those very, very elevated expectations in a rapid enough way is also quite a challenge. So when you look at all of that, anybody like myself who understands the markets well and also in a way understands the political realities and the economic realities would worry.
It's almost like a feeling that Narendra Modi has a magic wand, that he's going to come and wave it and all the troubles of the economy will go away. Is that the worrisome bit? That it's not going to be, even if you were to come to power, it's not going to be that easy, because we've gone through quite a slump. And it's not going to be easy to lift the economy back overnight.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, there are no silver bullets, right? I mean, we have an investment cycle that's been kind of flat on its back. Now, for a couple of years, there's been virtually no private sector investment happening in India. So to revitalize that, to get interest rates from where they are right now, and inflation, more importantly, from where it is right now, to deal with some of the supply side factors that are leading to high inflation, and as a result of that high interest rates, is very, very difficult. It's a very sticky proposition. Then finally, to be able to identify those massive bottlenecks that exist in the economy right now and really get progress on those, on things like manufacturing, for instance. Again, these are quite tricky challenges, and they are going to take some time to resolve. So we'll have to see. I mean, I think the part that we can unlock sooner is that, in fact, if there is a very credible 100-day agenda, for instance, in terms of tackling some of the policy issues, not so much the execution on the ground, because that may take longer. But if there is a sense that, you're decisive, you have the right policies in place, that you mean business, I think we can change sentiment. And we can restore confidence, which is really what Mr. Modi also spoke about on February 27. And if you can, in fact, restore confidence and you can get the capital flows going and you can get the animal spirits in the economy turned around, then that's the kickstart that you need to get all the hard work done. And then you have the wind in your back and you have the momentum to really pull that off. So I think that's what we really have to focus on in the first 100 days or so, is to really turn around sentiment and confidence, which is precisely what Mr. Modi spoke about.
I'll come to the economics back in just a bit, but I want to first talk a little bit about the politics that's going on right now, Jayant. Two of the concerns is, one, will you be able to forge necessary alliances? While some commentators have said you've already done a decent job in terms of getting hold of a few alliance partners, which nobody expected you to do. But there is still that open question that in several parts of the country, are you going to be able to strike bigger alliances? And secondly, there are these constant words that keep coming out of senior leaders of your own party, which are probably questioning certain decision-making. And that's leading to this fear that is everything all right in your party.
Right.
How would you respond?
Well, I mean, you asked two questions, so let me respond to them in turn. First, to the question of alliances. Now, Mr. Jaitley has written quite eloquently about the issue of alliances. Mr. Modi has spoken about it as well. I think it's very straightforward, which is that if indeed the BJP does well, and I would say that anything over 175, 180 seats is doing well, obviously, reflecting the fact that we did only 116 seats in 2009. I think if we cross that magic number, 175, 180, we are in a position of strength, particularly if, most of those seats are coming from the Hindi heartland and so on. And that's when alliances will naturally fall into place, because people will then see that there is a critical mass there around which you can forge a government. And that's the historical record as well. Whether you look at the Vajpayee governments of 1998 and 1999, you were in that sort of 180 plus zone, and that's when lots of people were willing to come and form a government with you. So in answer to your first question, I think the answer to that is, of course, we have to have good relationships and discussions going with everyone. But at the same time, we have to really focus on our own performance to ensure that we are, in fact, able to attract other alliance partners as well. And so that's really what I think has to be our priority. So we've got to be strong and perform well. Question number one, around alliances. Question number two that you posed was, there's a lot of discussion and debate that seems to be spilling out into the newspapers and into the media, right? Is that such a good thing? And what does that reflect? Does that reflect, unhealthy dissension and so on? Now, the answer to that is very straightforward, Vivek. And if you go back again and you look at the way Mr. Modi, in fact, became the prime ministerial candidate, there was a lot of debate and discussion at that point as well. I think that's great. I think that's very healthy for a democracy, that within a party, there are senior people with different perspectives, different points of view that can air their points of view, and at the end of it, a decision is made. I think we're in a similar situation.
Who's making that decision?
Well, I think the decision right now, we have a very clear decision maker, and that is Mr. Modi, because he is the prime ministerial candidate.
So he is making decisions.
Yes, and in any democratic party, it is important to have diverse perspectives and points of view and have a full and healthy debate around that. In fact, when you look at the presidential system in the United States and you have a primary, you have 8 or 10 people who are vying for the nomination for a major political party there. There are 10 of them, and they have 50 debates, and there's all kinds of perspectives and points of view. I don't see people looking at that and saying that's unhealthy. I think people look at that and say that's wonderful. And I think in some ways we have that as well. Now, once it becomes time to make a decision, as it is on March 13th when decisions will be made, there is a consultation. There are people who have the responsibility of making the decision, and they will. And if, in fact, there are disputes or trade-offs to be made, we know that Mr. Modi, as the prime ministerial candidate, is effectively in charge of the campaign. So the decisions will be made. So all in all, I would say, therefore, when you look at the BJP right now, I would say it's in rude health. And it is very good to have this kind of a high-quality debate and discussion about these issues, because then you really understand what can go wrong, what can go well, and you consider all of that in your decision-making.
Let's talk a bit of the economy. And the first point I want to touch on is something which your critics, including the current finance minister, has not stopped short of hitting the party on and saying that we've never heard you or your leader, Narendra Modi, talking about how he's going to fix the current account deficit. Now, as someone who's been working closely in framing that economic policy, and as someone who has personally had enough exposure in managing or consulting billions of dollars, what would you like to tell him?
Well, I think we have to make sure that we're asking the right question to the right person. I think Mr. Chidambaram is setting up a bit of a red herring, right? And it is, in fact, a trap in a way, because you don't expect Mr. Modi or Mr. Vajpayee to talk about the current account deficit. The leader of India doesn't have to deal with those issues. As Mr. Modi himself said at his speech, you know,
he has enough experts to advise.
He has enough experts. But more importantly, what you always want to know, Vivek, is how is this person thinking about their responsibility? And I think there Mr. Modi had a wonderful, wonderful response, because he said, I'm thinking about my role as the person leading this country in Mahatma Gandhi's view of trusteeship. So he's really thinking of himself, as he said in his speeches, as a chowkidar, as a steward, right? He's thinking of himself as a steward of India's economic fortunes. And as a steward and as a trustee, his role is to make sure that what he has is improved upon, that it is in the best of health, and then it's passed on to the next generation. I think that's very enlightened and very sophisticated in his thinking. That's the response, the exact right response to Mr. Chidambaram. You know, there is a saying in America where, you know, I spent many years, where you said, you don't wrestle with the pig. You don't wrestle with the pig because the pig enjoys it and you get dirty. I shall rest there.
So what is your own view? Let's understand that on fixing the cat.
Well, again, I think, you know, I'm an engineer by training. Mr. Chidambaram, of course, is a lawyer. So I think I have a better understanding in some ways about inputs and outputs, perhaps, because as an engineer, you're trained to think in that way. I think the current account deficit, inflation, you know, our import-export and merchandise and trade deficit is a function of the inputs. We are worrying. You cannot address an output unless you deal with the inputs. The way you deal with the current account deficit is not by dealing with, you know, some few superficial external levers. You really have to get to the root causes, the systemic issues that are making it difficult for us to do better on exports, for us to be importing too much. A lot of that is a function of our energy situation, etc. So I think to deal with the current account deficit, to deal with inflation, we really have to look at what the underlying root causes are. Rather than just dealing with the symptoms, we have to deal with the root causes. The root causes, as I said, means we have to fix manufacturing. Electronic imports into India are gigantic, you know, over $50 billion. Our total import bill is about, I think, $400–500 billion, of which, as I said, energy is huge, gold is huge, electronics imports are huge. Those are the ones we have to address and deal with. So the way we address the current account deficit is by fixing our manufacturing, ensuring that the financial repression that's been happening in India, which is why people have been putting money into gold and into real estate as opposed to productive assets and putting money into the capital market and so on. We have to address those underlying root causes. Once we address the underlying root causes, as opposed to doing temporary sort of fixes on gold import bans and so on, it's only then that we can truly turn the economy around. That requires hard work. I shall not say more.
I like the emphasis on that. Let's talk about inflation, because that's been one of the big issues, isn't it?
Yes.
Is there a plan that you and your colleagues are already working on? That if you were to come to power, what would be the one or two things that could be done to bring down inflation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it's one or two things, Vivek. Again, you know,
I'm sure there'll be many more.
So
but if you want to articulate,
I think it's somewhat disingenuous to think in terms of a magic wand or a silver bullet. And I think anybody who is dealing with the economy in a responsible way will not do that. I think inflation is a multifaceted problem. It has to be dealt with across many different domains. As I said, supply side issues are hugely important, and we have to make sure that the infrastructure is there, that we deal with our manufacturing policy, that we don't have the kind of pressure that we have on imports right now. So we have manufacturing, imports, energy, all of those areas have to be addressed. Then I think we have to look at agriculture. We have to raise agricultural productivity dramatically. As a lot of people have said, inflation is coming in many ways from food price inflation. So, well, why is food price inflation happening? Well, food price inflation is happening because rural wages are going up, because we've put in a lot of fiscal stimulus. We've got Narega. Narega, you know, has just gone up from 100 to 175 rupees a day. So you can't, on the one hand, talk about inflation and then on the other hand further boost rural wages as you do, because what happens is, as people become more affluent, naturally their consumption basket changes, and when their consumption basket changes from eating more cereals to eating more high quality food products like, you know, fruits, vegetables, eggs, milk, etc., then you know, obviously the prices of those goods go up because the supply side response has not been there. So we can't go in there and we cannot just immediately on the one hand, you know, jerk up wages by from 100 to 175, 75% increase, when the supply side response is not there, obviously you're going to have inflation as a result of that. So one has to be very thoughtful about what you're doing in terms of your subsidies and entitlements, and at the same time, making sure that agricultural productivity is going up. So again, coming back to what I said, inflation is a multifaceted problem, right? And you can't fuel it by some of these, I would say, while seemingly good for people, actually not so good for people, because even while you're saying wages are going up to 175, you're impoverishing them in terms of inflation. So it's
you believe structurally that schemes like Narega are not the right way to go out there and give subsidy?
I think that's where you do really need the experts, the economic experts, to do the very careful empirical studies to be able to disentangle that. I'm not that expert. I can't say. I'm just going by what I know at an anecdotal level and what experts have told me. So it appears that, yes, in fact, because rural wages have gone up, MSP has been high, as you know, minimum support prices have been high. Narega has created a lot of, and good in some ways, right, leverage for landless laborers and so on, who can therefore command a higher wage. And as a result of that, what you see is a higher demand for these kinds of foodstuffs. But at the same time, because you've not done the hard work on agricultural productivity, reforming agriculture, bringing in place technology and so on, you've just stoked the fires of inflation. And once you've done that, it's very difficult to be able to deal with all of that.
Let's talk about infrastructure, because that really was the crowning glory of the government, your government, when it was last in power. The Golden Quadrilateral, whether it was the power sector reforms, and that's really been the big concern for India Inc., isn't it? Yeah. Because that's just ground to a halt.
Yes, I think if you go back and look at the time of the NDA, 98 to 2004, and of course I'm biased, Vivek, when I say it, but in a way I will have to say it was a golden era in India's history, and India's certainly as far as economic policy making was concerned. Because when you look at it sector by sector, by sector, you see broad, sweeping structural reform that fundamentally set the stage for an investment boom, which eventually, got started in 2003 and ran for 5 or 6 years, also in a way abetted by, positive global forces. But construction, telecom, power, roads, all railways, in all these different areas, there was just tremendous structural reform, tremendous growth, and so on, right? Now, that is essentially the way we think about the economy, which is that we have to create opportunity, not focus on entitlements. Obviously, we need next generation social security. In fact, it was the BJP, and I myself worked on this and wrote several articles on it as well, have to put in place a safety net so that there's nobody who is deprived or feels that they don't have economic security. That goes without saying, Vivek. Any modern day society has to do that, right? That just is essential. So let's set that aside, because we have to have a next generation, high quality, efficient social security system. But you have to pay for it. To pay for it, you have to have growth. You have to have structural reform that enables sectors to take off, to add jobs. A lot of the jobs are created in construction and manufacturing. So you've got to make sure you have the policies in place for construction and manufacturing. All that is really a focus on opportunity creation, infrastructure, as well as growth and investment. And that really, we think, is the hallmark. That is the difference between an NDA approach, fully demonstrated in 1998 to 2004, and the UPA government, again, fully demonstrated in their track record of 2004 to 2014, a decade which has been lost for the Indian economy and has been tremendously damaging for our young people.
Let's talk about the other big concern, or perhaps one of the biggest concerns that India Inc. grappled with, which was project approvals. And in that was always the environment issue. We've seen this government trying to do course correction towards the end of its tenure, clearing projects one after the other. But on the more larger issue, what is your party's stand in terms of balancing the economy and its concerns with environment and its concerns? What's the kind of approach that you all would take if you were to come to power?
Again, we have a track record on that, both in our states, where I think we've done it really well, whether it's Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and so on, or when we were in power from 98 to 2004, a lot of things got done. I mean, the National Highway Authority got started, a lot of the Golden Quadrilateral got built. So I think we have shown that we have the administrative ability to deal with this kind of issues. I don't think there is an overall way to answer this, because it depends on each project, each state, And in every project, the set of issues related to the environment are different. I will add one more aspect to this, which is the land acquisition bill. There's a lot of talk right now, and I haven't frankly studied it in detail, so I don't have an opinion on it yet. But there's a lot of talk that I've read at least, and I've heard from people that the land acquisition bill is going to make it very difficult to do large-scale projects as well. So we not only have environmental issues, which are genuine and serious and have to be dealt with, I think we have land acquisition issues that are also very, very serious and that have to be dealt with. And then on the other hand, we have these projects. So these very conflicting priorities have to be reconciled. Now, I, among others, have argued that we need to have a group, not a cabinet committee on investment, which I'm not sure is the right answer. I think we need a group within the PMO, and in different countries they have that, which is called, a delivery unit or whatever it is, that takes up at any given time the list of the 100 top projects of national importance in India. Because as I was just saying, it's a matter of conflicting priorities, right? I mean, as a business executive, I can tell you, in a large corporation, when you have these different conflicting priorities, you have to have a unit that reconciles those, that considers the trade-offs, presents the trade-offs, and then makes a decision. I think we need something like that in India, because it has to be dealt with, as I said, on a case-by-case basis, but the right people have to be at the table, the consultations have to happen, and then there has to be decisive action in a time-bound manner. I think we need a delivery unit reporting directly to the Prime Minister, so that you can deal with the states, you can deal with the ministries, and you can deal with business people and the financial sector that's required to actually get these projects going. It requires a sophisticated response, because this is a complicated problem.
I want to talk about two issues with you which really spooked global investors. One was GAR, which spooked the FIIs, and then you had that whole retrospective issue. GAR has been deferred by 3 years. Most experts that I've spoken to say it's just merely a deferral. The problem hasn't been solved. And on the retrospective bit, we know what's going on. It's pretty much moved nowhere.
Yep.
These are, from a global investor point of view, still burning issues and alive. And I would like to get your thoughts, because I'm sure you interact with all of them. Would that be one of the priorities of your government to fix if it were to come to power?
Right. These are great questions, and speaking as an investor myself, I can tell you that they are of extraordinary importance to investors, because all investors have a right to a stable, predictable tax regime, and a sense that if they do their projections on the basis of a tax regime, and that they think that the returns are going to be at that level, then there should not be then later on action that makes it very difficult to get those returns. Otherwise, they'll go away and you never see them again, and that isn't going to work for the Indian economy. We know that. So this has to be addressed in a very orderly, thoughtful way. There's no question about it. Now, I don't speak here as as a representative of the BJP. I speak here in my private capacity. So all I can say to you there is that as far as the direct tax code is concerned, that really does need to be thought through. A number of people, and I myself have spent time.
Some of your senior leaders have told me that it will be reviewed. It will need a review.
I think that is the consensus view right now. I don't think that's just a political view. When you speak to business people, when you speak to tax accountants and so on, most people will tell you that it does need a real rethink. So I think as far as DTC is concerned and GAR is concerned, not just that there's going to be deferral, I think there has to be some very serious thought that goes into that, and there's a sense of whether it should even be brought up in the manner that it is. So I think that seems to be a consensus view, at least to some extent, emerging across a variety of stakeholders. So that's as far as GAR and DTC are concerned. Then we come to retroactive taxation. I think there as well, there is a very clear view now, and I think the RBI Governor, Dr. Rajan himself, spoke about that when he spoke in a speech and said, in retroactive taxation, you may be able to extract, $1 billion or $2 billion here and there, because you can eventually coerce companies to pay. But the damage that you inflict to the economy in terms of the opportunity lost and capital flight and everything else, because people don't want to invest in the economy, is worth tens, hundreds of billions of dollars. So it's a little bit of cutting off your nose to spite your face. It frankly doesn't make any sense to do that. I think, as I was saying earlier, if you want investors to invest with confidence, you have to give them a stable, predictable tax regime. And so as a result of that, I think retroactive taxation, in my own personal view, is just an idea that is wrong, just flat out wrong.
My final question to you, Jayant, when Mr. Narendra Modi says that governance has to be about a prime minister and 29 chief ministers and not just about 30, 35 cabinet people sitting in Delhi, is one economic takeaway of that he will push for GST to try and bring that in? Because that's been one of the biggest reforms that has been lagging.
Yeah, so I think Mr.
Is that one of the takeaways?
Yes, I think so. And Mr. Modi was very clear when he spoke about GST. He is in favor of GST. I think everybody in our party is in favor of GST. The question is how it actually should be implemented, and do you have the systems in place to implement it? Do you have the revenue sharing agreements in place that are fair and equitable to everyone else? So I think we absolutely want GST. In fact, if I remember right, the GST was in fact introduced during the NDA government, and this government merely took it forward. So philosophically and conceptually, we are fully in favor of GST. The question really is the implementation details. And this government has not been particularly good when it comes to implementation. So that has to be worked out. But once that's done, then I think, it will absolutely, certainly happen.
Are you fighting from Hazaribagh?
That we'll find out soon.
Okay, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Jayant. I wish you all the very best.
Thank you.